Everybody, nice to see you.
How'd the meeting go?
It was good. It was a good discussion with Indigenous leadership at the national level. National Chief Woodhouse challenged us to assemble a First Ministers meeting to discuss economic reconciliation. I think it was well received by premiers, certainly by me. And the feeling I came away with following the table is that we're all committed to ensuring success and prosperity across the country, but that we're going to have to do it together. And I think that's a strong message from Indigenous leaders, and it was well received by me and by premiers.
What does that do in terms of timeline to get these projects of national importance to move forward quickly?
Well, I'll speak for British Columbia. We know if we want to get projects done quickly, the projects have to have strong Indigenous partnerships. That can be equity, participating in the project directly. It can be benefits agreements. It can simply be being at the table in terms of the impacts of the projects, but we can get it done. We are getting it done. And we have more than $50 billion worth of projects in BC that are in process, ready to go, with strong Indigenous partnerships, and we're going to keep doing that work.
So when do you think this meeting might be?
Pardon me?
When do you think this meeting that the Indigenous leaders have proposed?
It was just proposed at the table by the National Chief. I think it's a good suggestion. We have some work to do on it in BC with our own partners, but I thought it was a good suggestion. Thanks very much.
Do you think they should have been invited to some Indigenous leaders were asking to be invited to the Boros meeting with Prime Minister Carney? Do you think they should be at the table?
Well, without question, Indigenous leadership need to be at the table with premiers and with the Prime Minister on issues of consequence. But just like Indigenous leadership have their own meetings, getting their heads together on how to move forward, premiers need space to get our heads together on how to move forward, and that's part of what's happening here.
U.S. senators want quotas on softwood lumber. What do you think of that?
Well, I think there's a moment right now where there's an opportunity for Canada to lead off our trade discussions by working to resolve the softwood lumber issue. And one of the reasons why I think that is that there's $7 billion sitting in a bank account of duties that have been collected unfairly, in my opinion, by the Americans, but setting that aside, it could be used to grow the market for everyone, show a win for everybody, and Canadian companies are willing to have that conversation at the table, including around issues like quota that have been a long-standing request from some American producers. If we could get a deal on this, it would support Americans, it would support Canadians, and it would be a net win. I'm a huge fan of the idea. I've been advocating for that with the Prime Minister. Start with softwood, let's get a deal done. And I'm hopeful that he's hearing that message. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Hello. Where do you guys want her to stand? Right here?
Oh, right.
All right, perfect.
Right here? This way? This way? All right. Hello. Hi, Michael.
How was the meeting?
Look, it was a productive meeting today. I want to thank the premiers and, of course, the chair for agreeing with First Nations, with the Assembly of First Nations, that we are to push for a First Ministers meeting in this country. And there's a lot to talk about. I know that it's always tough conversations, but it's so important that that we find a different way in this country, and to make sure that if there is also, to talk about creating big national projects, that First Nations are equity partners in that. So lots to do, lots of discussion to happen today. These conversations are not always easy. Our young country that we have, with First Nations kind of always being on the sidelines, and it's time now in 2025 that First Nations are at the table and that we have a bigger seat in this country. And we think that one of those paths, of course, is through a First Ministers meeting. And so we jointly call, of course, with myself, being National Chief, the Assembly of First Nations, and of course the premiers. We have consensus that we should have a First Ministers meeting.
Do you consider this progress?
Absolutely, I consider this progress. I'm glad that the premiers had agreed that we do have to have tough discussions with each other. They're not always going to be easy, but it's so important that we work together and sit at the same tables equally.
Do you feel pressure from the premiers? So all of the projects that are on the table, so they go faster. Do you feel that pressure?
I think that, first of all, I don't know what projects. I mean, I'm sure there's many. I haven't been involved with one in the past week or anything that I'm able to comment on. For sure, I think that we're all united against, Trump's illegal tariffs. That's one thing that's very clear around that table, and that's a uniting thing for this country. And I think all of Canada is united when it comes to that, First Nations included. We've always stood up for this country in every World War, World War I, World War II, dating back. First Nations have enlisted more than any other group of people in this country to protect this country so that all of us can live a free and good life. And again, we stand up again against these illegal tariffs that are pushed upon this country by by President Trump, and we stand with the premiers of this country in trying to find that path forward, as well as with the federal government to try and find the best path forward. But they have to make sure, though, that there's space for First Nations people at these tables. We cannot be left, as an afterthought anymore.
Has legislation like Bill C5 and Bill 5 made those conversations more difficult?
I think there's always conversations that are difficult, whether it's these bills or other bills. And I think that one thing is for sure, rushing bills through is not the way to go. I've said that time and time again to the media, that we need to respect each other in this country, and that means making sure that we do things properly and thoroughly, especially all of us here. We're all trying to make a better country. We want to make sure when we leave laws that they're good for everybody in this country, and that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren don't have to unravel things that, that maybe hurt all of us as a collective. So I think it's always better when we do bills together, and certainly rushing bills through is not a good way to start.
But both bills have now been passed, so what options are left open? What do you want to explore at this point?
Look, I think there's First Nations met with the Prime Minister last week, and I'm sorry the media wasn't in the room, but for sure there was lots of differing views and differing paths forward. I know that there's different projects all over the country that First Nations want to see move forward. Others are not sure yet, and there's still First Nations out there that are, wondering how to proceed with this bill. So there's lots of opinions coming in. I do ask that you all attend on September 3, 4, and 5 and hear from our chiefs directly on the impacts of this bill, their thoughts on moving forward. By then, hopefully we have we as the Assembly of First Nations, we bring our chiefs in assembly together, and then they provide that roadmap going forward. So I invite you to come and listen to our leadership and hear our decision, our discussions on moving ahead.
Do you think there is room for economic partnership, though? I mean, we've heard a lot of opposition from some Indigenous groups on these two bills. I'm not hearing that as much today from you. You seem to be striking more of a positive tone about this meeting. So do you think First Nations, or the ones that you represent, are willing to move forward now with the governments in these nation-building projects?
I think that the views are still very split. As the National Chief, as you can imagine, it's tough to say one way or the other. We do have, I'm sure, many different resolutions coming forward, September 3, 4, and 5, when our chiefs gather together. And until that time, I can't comment one way or another whether whether we're one way or another, because there's just lots of legal opinions coming up, First Nations talking to their people within their communities, and they should be given that time. And they should have been given that time before the passing of that bill. I absolutely agree with that. I know I've heard from premiers here that also said they weren't consulted. And, I feel for all Canadians, because I think that we shouldn't do that to each other. We should be respectful towards each other, give each other, whether they're environmentalists, whether you support one particular bill over another. Our democracy should always be that we hear those voices and that we do things in a careful, good way with each other.
If a project goes through Indigenous land and the Indigenous community there does not want that project to go through, do you think they should be able to veto or be able to kill that project?
Look, I'm going to say this when it comes to that. I think that First Nations, making sure that when you have a project, number one, that there's equity ownership for First Nations. I think any smart investor, any smart company, any provincial or federal government needs to make sure that they're talking to First Nations right away, right off the bat, when there's a potential project starting. I think that relationships are so important, and I think that you'll find by picking up the phone, by talking to First Nations people, you'll go a long way rather than trying to bulldoze through any community. And I don't think that's, I think First Nations, we're united in that we want prosperity, but not at the expense of our rights. So I think that has to be balanced, and I think conversations, just like, anywhere else, if you have those conversations and industry and governments talking at the table with First Nations governments, you're going to move a lot quicker and a lot faster. I mean, I've seen on one day last year, Chief Jeff Copenas, who had a mining company put him down for he didn't have the capacity to fully engage on a mining project. At that same day, I see another mining project with Wabkinew, Premier Wabkinew, and along with 7 other First Nations in that territory in northern Manitoba, and investors and everybody coming together, building something together. Why? What was the difference there? Respect and recognition and working together. And they're off on their way. And within Chief Jeff Kopaness's case, very much disrespectful, very one-sided. Didn't even want to hear out the chief. And I think that's the difference here. It's all of us trying to build relationships together is going to take us a long way.
Do you think you should be invited to tomorrow's meeting with the Prime Minister? Like, do you be included in that First Minister's meeting?
I always say that. I think national chiefs before me have always been, always said that. Some have maybe boycotted these meetings. I had asked my elders and my chiefs last week. I said, like, I'm debating on going to this event today. I'm glad that I came because I know that there's now a will to have a First Minister's meeting, so I'm glad for that. But absolutely, I think that First Nations should always be at every table, decision-making tables in this country, and we should no longer be left to the sidelines. So thank you so very much.
The FMM, that would be after your September meeting with your fellow AFN people?
Ask my friend.
All right, Premier.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the National Chief for coming here. As she mentioned, if I didn't call her, she wouldn't have been here. But it's all about building relationships. I called her personally, asked her please come, and we're building a relationship now, which is good. And where we're going with this is an FMN meeting with Indigenous communities. So that's really important too. Yeah.
So when will that be? Will that be after?
Well, we'll talk to the Prime Minister tonight, and then we'll really push it as quickly as possible to make that happen.
Premier, Central meeting, what do you feel you're walking away with? Did you get a green light, do you feel, from the Indigenous leadership to go ahead with whatever you wanted to do with special economic zones?
Well, what I heard, Colin, was they want to move quick. They're tired of talking. That's what I heard from all the chiefs around the table. All we hear is talk, talk, talk. Let's start moving forward. Let's consult. Let's collaborate, because when we collaborate, everyone prospers. They want to make sure that their children and grandchildren have better lives than what they had, and but they want consultation. I agree 100%. But their number one thing I heard is start moving. Stop talking, let's start moving, because this door is only open for so long that everyone seems to be working together, right from the municipalities to the provincial, federal, and First Nations communities, and we're going to work together and collaborate.
Well, what does that mean, though? Because this September, you wanted to have by this fall some special economic zones identified and start, moving to whatever destination you want to move to. Did you get specific assurances for them that will be allowed?
I think that's more of if I can call it bilateral one-on-one with that. We have 133 First Nations communities, and everyone's a little different, but the ones that want to be progressive, move quick, we'll move quick. Ones that want a little more consultation, that's fine too. We just want to work together, and everyone's going to prosper.
Premier, can you talk about the challenges that the National Chief is talking about when she says, like, opinion is split within the Indigenous community over whether they support these projects, whether they don't, whether they want to move forward, whether they don't? Like, what, as a government, what does the challenge present for you?
Well, you can't move forward without their collaboration and their buy-in. If they don't want to buy in, then there are other areas within the I'm just speaking for Ontario, within the province, that we've heard over and over again. I want to be part of the economic zone. I want to make sure we partner. We want to see prosperity. We want to get energy. We want to take advantage of the $3 billion of the equity that we've put forward for them to draw on. $70 million of training and $10 million of scholarships, which is my favorite, the $10 million of scholarships. So that's what they want.
Sorry, are you essentially saying, like, we'll work with the First Nations that want to work with us?
Yeah, well, for the most part. I can't do something if they don't want to do it, but there's enough people out there, enough First Nations communities that are saying, let's go. But what I heard, let's move quick, and I agree with them. We sit around and we can chat, we'll be sitting there chatting for another 2 years. They don't want that. They want to move. They want to target one specific project within their community, and they want to move on it. They want to be partners with us.
Last question.
If your initial timeline, then,
In the case of a First Nation one specific project, and your province, Ontario, wished to realize another project, which project the federal government you think will pick? Your project.
Well, you're gonna have to ask the Prime Minister. As far as as far as I'm concerned, nothing moves forward. And I said this even during my election, without the green light from the First Nations communities. But I'm glad to hear that they want to move quick, because they want prosperity. They're smart, hardworking people. They want prosperity. They want to be self-reliant. They want to see opportunities. So that's what we're going to do. But
Last question.
Building
guys.
pipelines to the west coast this morning.
Yes.
Was there any conversation with Premier Eby about that? Because he's not on board with that.
Yeah, no, that never came up. Well, there's going to be a great conversation around the dinner table tonight, and everyone kind of lets their hair down. And that's one great thing about all the premiers. They're all political different stripes, but we just tell each other what's on our heart and what's on our mind. And what's good for BC may not be good for Nova Scotia or Ontario. So everyone has their needs, and we try to facilitate it as a group of premiers. So it's a really good relationship, and everything, the world revolves. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. It's all about relationships in business, personal, and politics. It's about relationships.
So how does that change your timeline? If your original timeline was September, but now you're now open to more consultation, what timeline are you now looking at?
That's funny you say that, because I said to the whole group around the table, we have to set time frames, because without time frames in government and business and anything, you don't accomplish it. So the ones that want to hit that quick target, be it September as you're saying, that will be it. But the other ones have to put a time frame on it. It doesn't matter if it's 6 months or a year or whatever. Let's put a time frame, and we target that time frame. But we'll have an opportunity to chat more, and we'll have a good conversation tonight, and I'm always open to having. Yeah, I don't even know what they're grilling something. I'm not too sure what they're grilling, but they're gonna be at the cottage. They're gonna be grilling stuff at the cottage.
Did the chief give you that necklace?
Yeah, no, not the national. Another chief. I'm very, very grateful. I love these. It means everything. There's how much care and hard work they put into this, and for them to do that and then hand it to me, that's the utmost respect that I have for them. Anyways, thanks, guys.
Mr.
Carney going to be at your cottage for dinner
Thank
tonight?
you.
Yes, he is.
He's coming. Okay.
He's coming.
Okay, thank you.
This way.